Many of today's favorite recipes stem from traditional winter Christmas dishes. Let's fall into 20 forgotten holiday meals as we await the season. So let's start off with something that keeps your appetite going when the heavy feasting takes a toll on your stomach: Christmas snow salad. Now, this came out in the 1982 issue of Southern Living, which was a time where its use in Christmas buffets peaked. Why they got so much use on such occasions makes sense when you consider how sweet and pretty they are. When a dish looks good and tastes even better, it sets the mood, and maraschino cherries, marshmallows, and whipped cream definitely help when you need a break. This wonderful Christmas dessert unfortunately became more and more rare as people started preferring fewer fruity flavors in their holiday food. Honey glazed carrots are just as good of a refresher as a fun winter salad, and they are wonderful to munch on if you do not feel like eating spoonfuls of even some dessert. Glazed carrots were a common side served alongside a hot and tender potato casserole during the 60s to 80s. It was almost a given, really. Dishes like these really drove the seasonal demand up in the local farmers market, and it was a common part of grocery shopping lists. A honey glazed carrot serving is usually soaked in a sweet and thick mix of butter, brown sugar, and sometimes cinnamon. People would caramelize their carrots as well and serve them with ham for style points. Honestly, we cannot be sure why this ever faded away, since it seems like a pretty solid idea all around, but you can never predict culture changes. So apple bourbon pies took center stage in the latter half of the 20th century when bourbon-infused desserts became particularly popular. A lot of people already have apple pies and mince pies, so when they started to experiment with some other ingredients, a lot of state-to-state versions of this pie came about. Apple bourbon pie would taste very warm and rich in its flavor, and it was traditionally a part of a lot of festive celebrations in America. This would not be the last time that America would tangle with boozing up their baking either. A lot of alcohol-infused desserts would soon emerge in the period where the bourbon pie was elite. Typically, another party dish that would be served alongside such pies were slow cooker grape jelly meatballs. Now, the entire recipe and process might make you question what we are talking about here, but give us a minute and we will have you on board. See, people found out in their tinkering of American cuisine that jellies and sauces work together, particularly grape jelly and chili or barbecue sauce. They would typically be mixed in a slow cooker, then the meatballs were added, and it was cooked for 4 to 5 hours. We cannot be sure who made this yummy treat served on a toothpick, but community recipe collections around the 70s and 60s first featured the idea of mixing jelly and sauces. Maybe it came from a neighborhood one Merry Christmas night? Baked ham. With a brown sugar glaze is an American favorite, and that relationship has stayed tight throughout many years in the 20th century. Ham as a meal, particularly baked ham, came from the first wave of Europeans who migrated to America. With British American cuisine now in the play, baked ham became such a popular option on the dinner menu at their houses that other Americans got interested. Soon, everyone was having baked ham, and midway into the 20th century, people started messing around with different glazes. Once they stumbled on brown sugar, which added this hit of caramel and made the ham so much richer, it became a primary choice for Christmas for many years, until brown sugar as an ingredient became very rare in American cuisine. Ambrosia pudding pie was a dish that shook some culinary norms when it first came around because it has its roots in ambrosia salad. This salad was a traditional dish at American tables throughout the 30s to 50s and much of the early 20th century. A pretty citrusy and flavorful mix, it usually had things like coconut, mini marshmallows, oranges, and diced pineapple. First, people added whipped cream and cream dressings, which eventually led to using it as a pie filling in a beautifully presented pie crust. It was a real showstopper, the kind that would leave your in-laws speechless during dinner and gossiping non-stop after it. The crust is usually filled with either an ambrosia pudding or custard, and some states like the South would add fruits or nuts too. It definitely is something that is more of a nostalgic sweet than a current trend today, despite its strong pros. Now, homemade eggnog is something that comes to our tables as naturally and certainly as snow falls to the ground. An absolute must-have that Christmas just does not feel complete without. Something that even overtakes the esteemed fireplace and hearth in terms of getting the Christmas cheer going. It is a favorite. Have you ever wondered when exactly it first got viral, though? You would have to go back all the way to the colonial times, where it was really popular in medieval Europe, who eventually brought it with them to the American upper class as a Christmas treat. Since the ingredients were so simple and easy to get, normal people and households everywhere started making it too. While it is not as popular in homes in the 2020s as it once was, it is still an icon of Christmas cooking. Creamed codfish, on the other hand, was something that America did not get too familiar with until the early 20th century. Traditionally, dreamed codfish would always involve some salted cod that had been soaked, which was then flaked and prepared in a creamy white sauce. People would usually opt for milk-based sauces, so they had a pretty thick, warm, and flavorful meal. Salted codfish became especially popular because of how cheap the overall preparation was. Plus, before refrigeration became really popular, people would always have salted cod lying around because cod was really easy to preserve. People have come a lot farther in terms of what they can preserve and the meats we have day to day now, so cod fell out of fashion. Molded cranberry salad was something that was a bit more popular at Thanksgiving originally, but soon became a dish that would stay around for many Christmases to come. This refreshing side takes cranberries and mixes them with dried fruits and marshmallows, and it would all be held together using Jell-O or a gelatine base. Basically, it was some pretty fancy Jell-O salad. After a long, hard day of feasting at the many homes you visit during the Christmas season, some well-deserved cranberry relaxation is very much in order. People loved how molded cranberry salads were not heavy at all, but rather just the thing to cleanse your appetite and get you back on the table. People would often do a lot of their Christmas cooking a day in advance or in the afternoon before the big guests came, so having delicacies like make-ahead yeast rolls in the fridge was a common sight. These would be made in advance and typically frozen before they were ready to be baked. The best part about these rolls was that they were empathetic about the fact that you had a busy work schedule, and that is why they got so popular. People could just make entire batches of these and leave them in the fridge, waiting for just the right moment to begin baking them. You would never even be able to tell you were eating pre-made food because of how fresh it is and how soft the preparation makes it. It gets 2 rises to achieve the perfect fluffy consistency. All in all, this was a wonderful Christmas snack, and we would not mind if it came back. People hang all kinds of Ule Logs up during the merry season of Christmas, and Bûche de Noël happens to be one of them. Not sure what we mean. Did you know the name Bûche de Noël literally means Yule log? No wonder most of them are designed to look like an edible hunking log when you think about it now. Bakeries would have these being sold out in high demand and would really take some artistic and creative liberties with a design. Each place had its own kind of edible Yule log waiting for you, and all of them seemingly had the recipe nailed down just right. Bûche de Noël were a holiday regular for a long time, but lately meringue mushrooms, powdered snow, and overly strong chocolate-based desserts have gone out of style. Of course, if people had eggnogs and Yule log cakes, they had their cocktails, and retro Rum Punch definitely hits pretty hard, sometimes well above its weight class. A 1960s party cocktail that dominated the drinks menu of home events across America, retro Rum Punch was a really nice and easy drink to prepare. All you needed was some rum, orange mango juice, lemon juice, and some pineapple juice, and then some soda water. You could have a large punch bowl filled to the brim with these and have it empty before the guests leave, so most people always made some extra bowls just to be prepared. This is probably another thing that British Americans brought with them since it was typical in European countries, but we sure are glad they donated to the food scene of America with a pleasant rum punch. Also, it sounds so citrusy and tropical, we just would love to have a glass. As long as we are speaking about Christmas appetizers and things that go great during a conversation, classic cornbread dressing is probably the holy grail of dishes like that. It was already something that was really popular in Southern American cuisine and states, and that was a habit America mostly picked up during the 19th century. Cornbread itself became pretty popular after the Civil War when corn was so cheap that it became mass-consumed. You might not know this, but even in the South, a lot of classic cornbread dishes dressing ideas were first popularized and tried in African American cooking communities. It was a bare-bones recipe with just cornbread crumbs originally mixed with some broth, but now it includes things like sausages, meats, onions, and herbs. Definitely one of the tastiest appetizers out there that we would love more of in today's Christmas scene. Many of the dishes on this list have muddied origins, so we cannot tell where they first came from, but we know who to thank for the old-school green bean casserole. Dorcas Riley first made this vintage slice of heaven in 1955 when she was working at the Campbell Soup Company. In their test kitchen in the home econ department, the company gave their workers a goal. This was to make a dish that was simple, effective, and appealing to the mass American palate, and could be made with ingredients people had in their homes. The result of that was the green bean casserole, and we gotta say, Dorcas really hit the nail right on the head. While today some places still make green bean casseroles, this original recipe that Riley first popularized in the mid-1900s is definitely a lost art. Rumballs were a confection that people adored in the early 20th century. It would typically be made of chocolate and some rum with crumbs of cookies or nuts mixed in for a crunchy sensation. It is not sure where they came from or who started them, but after their initial introduction in the early parts of the 20th century, they really spiked in popularity in the mid-half. Most variations would include powdered sugar and cocoa powder, and the idea itself was something a lot of Americans could get behind pretty easily. Bite-sized rum-soaked balls were not something you needed to ask anyone twice about us, including us, because if you saw these at the function, you were definitely stopping to get a couple. Sometimes called bacon-wrapped Smokies, bacon bow tie crackers were one of the most beloved appetizers in the 60s to 80s stretch of American food history. That was when bacon really exploded as this stereotypical American dish that everyone just incorporates into their diet. Sometimes people would amp up the grease by adding a thick but sweet glaze that definitely worked in favor of the bacon, just not so much for your arteries. Who cares about long-running health decisions in the face of potential food comas, though? It is not like people particularly watch what they eat around Christmas anyway, and we prefer it that way. You have the chewy goodness of bacon combined with crackers for a smoky, salty but sweet meal that really gets you in your celebratory spirit. Despite their versatility and how easy they are to make, culinary trends were unfortunately just not shifting in their favor. Cheese and bacon are an ageless combo, and along with those bow tie crackers, people would stuff themselves with cheddar cheese straws. Have you ever thought about how much of our comfort food we have Southern American cuisine to thank for? The home chefs down there really know how to put you back in high gear before the weekend's over. So down to the specifics, these would be from grated cheddar cheese dough and have butter and some spices, flour, and salt added. Put that through a cookie price and cut them into strips, and you have the whole thing ready to go. It was incredibly easy, even tastier than it sounds, and a great way to warm up after a long train ride on your way to your relatives. If you ever find yourself celebrating Christmas down in the South, you definitely should go to a local pub or bar and see if they are serving some of these. It was a well-beloved snack back in the 90s, but you should still be able to find some good straws today. As people went across the 20th century exploring different avenues of cooking and expanded their horizon, they eventually would find themselves stumbling upon pecan coated pork loin roasts. America always enjoyed a good old-fashioned loin roast, but even the best of things can sometimes get a little old and need a new spin on them. Pecan coatings were just the thing for that dilemma, and brought loin roasts back in style as if they never ever left. Particularly in North America, where pecans are a natural resource, and in the South once again, this kind of loin roast was a Christmas speciality. The idea was to take classic dishes and reimagine them with easy day-to-day ingredients. We have to say, home cooks really outdid themselves with this one. What was initially just only regionally popular became a wildfire spreading across America that lots of people remember fondly today too. Chicken Alouettes were a bit of a new idea that most common folk had to grapple with, but one they happily warmed up to all the same. Chicken breasts that were typically packed with fillings mixed with herbs, veggies, and cheese, and bell peppers pan-seared to perfection. It was something that only had regional popularity, especially in French-American communities. During the start of the 60s, America would have a much more growing interest in how much cooking differed from region to region and in different states. They began to take more ideas from their neighbors hundreds of miles away, especially when French cooking was something people got more infatuated with here. Gotta love some of that Paris charm on your dinner table, right? You could still find a good one at a nice French-American joint today, but it is not something home cooks would be familiar with now. First making its appearance in New Orleans, Louisiana during the end of the 19th century, oyster Rockefellers are a certified American classic, and anyone would agree with you. Half-shell oysters topped with a mix of greens, herbs, butter, and then baked until the oysters are cooked. Recipes varied from state to state, but if you ever wanted to awaken the seafood lover in you or someone you knew, you would take them out on the town for some of these. Especially in coastal cities and areas where people would get fresh catches regularly. Honestly, we think seafood has been a little ignored lately in the culinary trends of the nation, and we would love to steer America's ship more in the direction of oldie goldies like these. Did you find any forgotten dish you would like back on your Christmas platter? Let us know in the comments below and subscribe for more.